Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Stierle. And, Bill, I struggle, I think like many people, maybe about half the people in the United States, with really understanding Trump supporters. And,
yes,
we do see some Republicans who are not Trump supporters, and it's if you listen to what they say, it's pretty easy to understand why they're not supporting Trump. But Trump supporters, the ones that are really enlisted, I have trouble understanding the things that they say, and it's very hard to understand. And I think it'd be helpful if we can sort of dive into that a little bit.
well, Tom, I really appreciate us talking about this topic because no matter if Trump gets reelected or not, if he does or if he doesn't, the same issue is still there. The same issue is that how does a person, whether Democratic or Republican, get hooked into an identity, and how language is used, because this is a communication show, how language is used to hook into a person's identity and really kind of almost solidify their mindset on this person or this situation or this value. And there are some markers that we can start becoming compassionate and empathetic about to start us down the process of reunifying or restoring America as an inclusive place, not an exclusive place. I knew this many, many times from my mom and my dad. America's in a melting pot. It's a place where people come to get a new start, get to be treated equally, get to have their whatever identity that they had in the past, but then they get to paste over America over top of that and say, yeah, I'm this person, I'm in this person, but I'm also part of this greater vision of America. And the idea of melting pot is not the primary value that's necessarily being taught or spoken. My mom I used to ask her, I said, Mom, you're Italian. Your mom spoke Italian. Yeah, she wouldn't let us speak Italian. I go, why didn't she speak Italian? She goes, well, because you're in America now and you're going to speak English because this is because you're a part of this country now. So they didn't speak Italian around the house. They spoke English so that the kids would get used to English and being a part of America, because in America you spoke English. Well, if my grandparents, my mom's mom, really stood for that melting pot, you're here now, these are these values here, we're not doing the old Italian values as much. Of course, a lot of those things came forward to me anyways, but if we're not going to do that, then I've got to be a part of this greater vision. But some people, or those messages of inclusion, are not being used anymore, the message of exclusion. So you can there's a lot of exclusion language that people have. And racism is a part of that exclusion language, as well as many other. there's many other key traits and messages that cause this level of disconnect to take place. I mean, even talking to our friends and families, you can see that in real time.
I would agree with that. You can say that, can't you? Well, so what are some of I guess are we do have a what do you call it, sort of a roadmap for breaking down the different qualities, traits of Trump supporters and trying to understand them, don't we?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we're going to need to use, whether Trump gets elected or not, is to um, really have compassion and empathy for how the different people have invested in these various different messages, and that's where they cast their vote. A person, there's all these different, there's 48 different biases and fallacies that people have. And of those, people run about 6 to 10 of those in their consciousness. So they're running these different biases and fallacies that people run language-wise. So, for example, if a person votes for the practicality of Trump, because there's a practical reason to vote for him. I'm voting for Trump because he is going to give me a tax break. He promised it. Therefore, I'm practically voting for money. I'm practically voting for Trump because he promised jobs coming back from China. That's what he promised. And whether he did it or not, that's not important to me. It's that he promised. I'm voting for Trump because he is going to get rid of abortion, and it is the number one thing. Practically, I'm voting for him. Everything else is falling aside. Now, I can have empathy and compassion for all of those things. The money is about fairness or a value that I want to keep inside my family and not spread throughout the nation. The second one has to do with jobs, which is my way of living, and the way I used to make a living has to change because the job went to China, and all of a sudden I am out of luck in my little small hometown because manufacturing left here and went there. Or I have a religious mindset, which is saying, hey, life is sacred no matter how it's created, because this is the magic of my spirituality and the way my faith goes. So this one trait is enough to get somebody to vote, and you can't waver off of it. Because if you're voting for this, if you vote for the other guy, well, that means I have uncertainty about money, I have uncertainty about job, and I have uncertainty about my primary religious value regarding abortion. See how easy that is to really, to go, oh, so you're just voting for that one thing. That's an interesting way to do it. I'm kind of looking at some other wreckage around here that he's caused in other ways, but doesn't seem like you're looking at that. You're looking at these other things. So it's really unsettling as that being one of these key traits, and there are 14 identifiable traits, although there could be a couple of more if I thought about it a little bit more. But a lot of this came from an article that a friend of mine passed on to me from the Raw Story, which is a more of a left-leaning magazine or online article that from time to time does a pretty good job of going like, hey, this is a thing. You may want to look at this thing, and so that you can discuss this thing because this is a real thing. And that's really a big part of the mindset that we need to do if we're going to move into a place of restoration with the language that we use, to be more inclusive versus exclusive. Inclusive is really important because we get to see that we're one nation. under God, indivisible. I think we're doing all those things. Aren't we doing those? I think we're still doing those.
I think
One nation, under God, indivisible. I think those are the ones. So, I mean, even with the announcement that Trump made last night, it's like, yeah, we might contest it because I think that there's fraudulent things. I think that there's this thing. There's the fraudulent things. But wait a minute, the line is one nation under God. It's not one nation under whoever thinks is the election. It's like, it's not written that way, you know? So we've got to really pay attention to really what the target is in our messaging and what we're standing for. Are we going to stand that way, or are we going to divide it and really make certain states matter more than other states, which we're kind of doing?
I think we are kind of doing that. It's unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah. So states' rights becomes ahead of this. So if I'm a state and I don't like what another state is doing, well, guess what? I'm gonna charge that state more. I'm going to have a tariff on that state. I mean, this is where this one goes if you don't know indivisible. But if you go into the divisible place, this is where this one lands. This one lands, oh yeah, you want to compete against other states? Fantastic. Good. We'll roll up our sleeves and watch what happens there. That's not the space America wants to be in.
The whole idea that a state is good if the governor is in alignment with me, the president, and the state is bad if the governor is not in alignment with me as president is very concerning.
One nation under God, indivisible. Just stay with that simple phrase.
Yes.
And hang with it. And if I'm hearing pushback, I think I'm going with this sentence. How about if we just go with this one? Yeah, I can hear your point of view, but I'm going to stay with this sentence. I hear your point of view, and I'm not believing that, but I'm still putting this sentence over those sentences that you're saying. Oh, so you would like me to hear that, but you know what? We're one nation. I think we're supposed to be indivisible, right? I mean, that's the meme. That's the message.
Right. Sure.
That is really the literal message that goes, we're doing this one. We're doing this sentence. We're not doing the other one. So it's really, really important. Anyways, so all of a sudden I'm on a monologue here. So let's see if we can get empathy and consideration to show up here. Now, the second way to get empathy and consideration is that human beings' brains get hijacked with our attention span, and there's certain messages that create a dopamine level increase, and Trump does that better than Biden does, and most certainly did it better than Hillary Clinton did, which was create a reward, create anticipation, and create a sense of uncertainty. He just did that with the election. He says, well, I'll see when we get there. You'll see when we get there? That's saying I don't trust the state's ability to count.
Right. Yeah. But let's just be clear. The question was, are you going to support a peaceful transition of power? That was like the question yesterday. And he says, well, we'll see. We'll see when we get there. That is not very supportive of our American principles.
That's correct. Now, here's what all of the reporters missed. Are you ready?
Oh, I want to hear it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. One needs to empathize with that sentence, not get appalled by it. If you are empathizing with the sentence, Tom, and this is like the $50 million value in this particular podcast. All right.
Yep.
At least 50 million. I might get it closer to 500 million in a second here. But really, to empathize with the sentence, we'll see, might sound like this from the reporter. Oh, so you feel doubtful and skeptical that the states have the ability to count their own votes, and you don't trust certain states. Is that correct?
What would he have said
Yes.
to that? Just
He
yes?
has to say yes.
Okay.
He has to say yes. So, Mr. President, what states don't you trust? Oh, there's just many of them. Many states I don't trust. Oh, would it be more the blue states or the red states do you trust? Well, we'll have to see about that. So you have the thought that certain blue states don't have integrity and trust to count votes. Well, in the past, there have been states that haven't done that. Oh, so you really don't trust the election system. You trusted it when you were elected, but you don't trust it when other people with this vote. Is that correct? Well, yeah, I voted fair and square. I won fair and square. Oh, so you really trusted it back then, but you really don't trust it now. See,
Wow.
it puts the value where it needs to be put. You got to stare down your own shock and appallingness. I'm listening to it, and you and I talked about this a little bit before the show. We were both appalled by it initially, and I was going like, no, I'll just stare the sucker down and go like, how can I be empathetic and compassionate to it so it doesn't look so damn scary? It's not really particularly scary, but the dopamine level goes up, and it wipes out the adversary because the person's going like, how could this person be so out of integrity? And the answer is he's just hijacking your dopamine, not that he's just doing what he can to change your physiology.
But Bill, there's nobody out there doing what you can do with this. There's nobody there. None of the journalists have the skill. None of the, television anchors have the skill. And boy, it'd be great if they did, if one of them did. I mean, even some of the most revealing interviews with the president have been obviously Bob Woodward and have his recordings for his book Rage and the Axios interview from HBO that really just let the president just run off his mouth and shoot himself in the foot. They're not actually throwing him empathy to reveal truth and to allow this to happen. None of them know how to do it. So I wish that some did.
Yeah, me too. I mean, America does have an obsession with celebrities. That's one of also the traits. We do give power over to rich people. We do give power over to people that are seen or known, and we take power away from people we should be giving power to, with people that are well researched, people that have skill and mastery like myself. It's like, who's going to listen to me if I don't have enough followers, if I'm not getting 10 million people listening to me? Who's going to listen to that? Well, that's one of the problems that with some of the skilled people, as well as even some people that are well known and have an entire historical track record, Dr. Fauci, of dealing with the variances of these different diseases. And we're going like, why are people not believing the expertise? And there's this death of expertise that we've talked about on this show before, that we also are going to do another episode about coming up here, that are really a part of, well, it's a lot easier to look at Reagan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jesse Ventura, Donald Trump, and getting those folks to really, like, all those are also ran on the either independent or Republican ticket, is that, wow, these people really have made something for themselves, whether it was handed it to them or not, or whether they had the different values that they did. It really had some upsetting pieces to it, because some of them were not interested in the best outcomes for the nation. It was for more the people that got them elected versus the people that was the best. Ask the soy farmers in the Midwest, when the trade war showed up, and all of a sudden we had to do a socialistic activity, which was We became socialist. Trump did a socialist activity by giving them money for nothing. That's what he did. And that's what socialism is, right?
Yeah.
That's giving somebody money for something. And
just to balance out the income inequality in a certain sector of our economy in agriculture. Yeah, but of course Trump supporters will never say that was socialism.
Right. He had to do that because of China. It's like, no, he didn't. He had capitalism running just fine there. The capitalism was running great. Now, there were other things that could have been done, but he didn't take any of those options, and he wasn't even listening to any experts. Just saying, But all right. So these different values, these different traits that Trump supporters really invest in is something to empathize with. Yeah, there's something to be said with somebody that's worked hard and has developed skill, like Ronald Reagan most certainly developed skills as an orator, as a speech maker, and as an actor. And Arnold Schwarzenegger came out of really kind of the weightlifting thing and moved his way into politics and did all the things that he did from that space. Of course, and same as Jesse Ventura, it's like, yeah, I can run this thing. As soon as he gets in there, he's going like, holy crap, I can't run this thing. And
I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger does not become governor of California if he were not famous first.
That's right. And he does not. And same as the wrestler, it's Jesse Ventura in Minnesota, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, right.
Yes.
So I think it's Minnesota. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he runs it, and after that he's going like, do not elect a celebrity for this job. He became the don't act that celebrity that's running. I was that guy that you elected last time. They don't know what they're doing. don't elect that. He actually became that advocate. I was like, oh my gosh, here's the message that you need to, this is the guy that knows something about being elected as a celebrity. And all of a sudden he's got a point of view and he's showing up there. He's going, do not elect a celebrity. Of course, what do we got? We got another celebrity.
We have a celebrity in the White House now. Yeah.
So unsettling. So these hooks or these triggers that cause us to really look at our fellow Americans, our Trump voter Americans, and not look from a place of disdain, but look from a place of compassion that, if I allowed my thought to get hooked in that way, I could be there right there with them. Even the thought, even the people that just want to burn the system down, because there's one key trait that some voters are going like, you know what, this is the way for me to basically flip off Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C. hasn't helped me at all. And one way to do that is to elect Trump. And I'm enjoying the winner takes all. I enjoyed the Apprentice because the Apprentice made sense for me. There was 12 people. He was going to fire them one at a time, and there's going to be one winner. I want that simple black and white decision-making process. And so I want to watch the world burn. I want to watch the world burn because then, this is called tragic empathy, by the way, then people will understand how helpless I feel. Because if I make a liberal feel helpless, now you know how I feel with my thought structure, and you get to feel as helpless as I felt. Instead of us collaboratively getting both of us over the fence.
So this one maybe could be described as I'm going to make a second rung to try to make it right, plan.
Yeah, I can say, listen, I'd rather them experience what I experience rather than the other thing, And so, it's very, very unsettling. I wanted to find the feeling word for the way that person feels. The descriptor is tragic empathy. The feeling looks like helplessness, but when I in the article it went and it gave a German word, and it was I'm not even going to attempt to try
Oh,
to
the Schadenfreude thing?
Schadenfreude, is that what it is?
Schadenfreude, yeah.
Schadenfreude, yeah. So Schadenfreude, I was looking, I was going like, I ain't going there. But thank you for doing that. It's the experience of pleasure, joy, or satisfaction that comes from learning or witnessing the troubles and failures or humiliation of others. I feel better
Wow.
because I am having pleasure and joy and satisfaction from learning and witnessing the troubles and failures and humiliation of others, because this is the way I used to feel.
Oh, I can understand a lot of Trump supporters feeling that way, probably, especially if Trump wins this next election and, the rest of us are faced to live with that.
Yeah. And it's complex. It's not sympathetic towards the person's, loss. It's, so what? It's, I feel better. And actually, Trump actually lives in this space. He lives in the space of, oh, so you lost? Well, watch this. I'm going to have you lose again. Oh, I'm going to have you lose again. In fact, I'm going to drag this thing out for things that I'm going to take your money and have you lose again, because I have enough money to run out the clock on you. And this kind of mindset, it's really weird. The definition actually goes into it. It says, this emotion is displayed more in children than in adults. And I'm going like, oh my gosh.
I know.
I'm going like, wait a minute, hold on a second. So because because this is a languaging podcast, it's not supposed to be partisan, right? It's still, we need to illuminate what's alive. We can't not look at it. It's like, this is what's there, and we also got to be really just compassionate about that. That even it doesn't matter what party you're on, you can get hijacked down one of these things very, very, very easily. Down any one of these different points and different moments. Oh my gosh, I'm like totally chuckling because I'm just trying to stay out of the dark pool of despair. It's like because it's easy to get into that space. It's easy. Yeah. So another one of these points that we need to have compassion and empathy about for Trump voters is the thing called the fear factor. The fear factor is when there's a sensitivity towards the need for safety and protection and the need for stability and consistency. And one of the things that Trump does a great job of is that he hits that button of safety, protection, even trauma, even imagined trauma. And because that is something that is prevalent that has been prevalent in media over the last 30 years of movies and TVs, of the violence and the violence escalation, of what's the body count of evil people that the hero needs to kill. So our sensitivity towards safety and trauma has actually been activated. So he's just hijacking that inside them. So if Trump says the sentence, the crime rate in America, it's just way up there. They literally give him a push and say, oh yeah, that's right, it is up there. Not because it's real, because it isn't, because it's dropped 24% over the last 10 years. It's like, no, it's not as big. But where it has escalated is in media. We see it in TV shows.
Yeah, like now especially we see a lot more of the you know, how would you say, a lot more videos of police officers that are, hurting suspects, and in some cases, overuse of force to the point of somebody dying. And it may not be that there's a lot more of that happening now than there was 20 years ago, but technology is allowing people to see it. So it's
That's right.
much more present in the mind, right?
That's right. It's more amplified. It's more amplified, and all of a sudden, it's like something that happens in. You can create an entire narrative of 200 people walking down the street or 300 people walking down the street in Portland, Oregon, and create an entire story and an entire fiction around how violent it is. Meanwhile, it's going like, it's Portland. It's like, I don't think so. It's like, but people don't have it in the perspective. It's because they're not there. All they're seeing is selected clips of violence, even from other violent places. And some people have been caught on this, using violent moments from other cities in other countries in the video and assigning it to Portland. That's when truth really does get purchased. It's like, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true, that all of a sudden this French Revolution over here, or the French uprising over here, or this French thing over here, that just happens to be a small video clip of the worst thing ever there, shows up over here. That doesn't mean crime's going up, and it doesn't mean that blue states are lawless. It's like, oh my gosh, but we can't get it. Our safekeeping mind, our protection mind, and the trauma that comes from that, we can't get it out of our mind. So therefore, what winds up happening, regrettably, is the brain gets hijacked, and the voter goes like, listen, he sounds more safe than the other guy is. Mm-hmm. You see what happens is that you see, it's like, oh, he sounds more safe. Why? Because he talks tougher. He doesn't do anything. Everybody knows that this tiger doesn't, not everybody, people know that many times he says things and doesn't follow through. People will call it a lie. I just call it a promise that he's broken. He promised something. Doesn't mean he's going to do it.
But then again, if you're back to one of our earlier traits here, well, he may not have done it, but he's still promising it. And I like that.
My teenage boy promises to do his homework. My other boy promises to clean his room. And I'm very clear that from time to time, they will not do those two things. Now, do I call him a liar for the rest of my life? Or do I just say, oh, this boy needs a little more leadership and guidance? It's like, or this person I don't need to put in charge of certain things because the level of trust isn't quite there yet around certain items. Very, 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 very important. So
yeah, it is.
Yes, it is. It is. So the feeding into the safekeeping mind, the protection mind, also leads us to that if a leader continually provides this narrative, it's a languaging problem, the narrative of perceived existential threat. Perceived. All they needed is to be perceived. There are thousands of people massing at the southern border. I'm sending the National Guard out to the border. No one's there. And the National Guard comes back, but too late already. The voter has already anchored in the existential threat, and that if there was one, Trump would be able to be the person to do it, let alone all the money he wasted of taxpayer dollars by sending all of those people there, which is not fiscally conservative, which used to be a Republican value, but is clearly not anymore. Fiscally conservative is something they're not really fully interested in. Otherwise, they would be voting and making other choices as a party. They're really not. Because otherwise, they would say, hey, it's not fiscal responsible to send all of these people down there and spend XYZ money of taxpayer money on that. We want less government. We don't want more money going to government. We want less.
And isn't this a similar thing to what the president has now done with vote by mail? I mean, it's not a person, an outsider, or or this mob or group, but he's casting this vote by mail is going to steal this election from you.
That's an internal existential threat. Wow, that was a great catch, Tom. INTERNAL. Let me put it down there. So it's an internal threat would be the post office being dysfunctional. POST.
Well, yeah, or I mean, whether it's the post office or just the very idea of voting by mail, that he's painting it as fraught with fraud when in fact it's not, but he's branding it.
He is literally branding it and selling it with anticipation. All those 3 steps we went over. There's a reward. We want to make sure our vote counts. Number 2, anticipation of it not taking place. Therefore, don't vote because it's not going to be counted right. And then number 3, it's, well, I don't know how that's going to work. And, oh, by the way, did you see that there's the machines that they're not available? But it doesn't say, oh, I gave the order to get the machines to come offline. He's not saying he's the one that's creating the existential crisis. Him and the people that are in charge, are going to be, and these folks are going to have a consequence for for following this narrative. Their long-term consequence is going to outweigh their short-term gains. They don't know it quite yet, but that's the way these things sort of come around a little bit. It's like if you push on these kinds of buttons and you do have a short-term win, there will be a long-term cost. There will be. Certain people just won't do it. And it's upsetting and irritating, but that's a big part of it. I think the last one that we could talk about, Tom, and there's many more that we can talk about, but if we take a look at, there's this bias called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where human beings often overestimate their expertise. They say, I know a lot about this thing. And whether it's political expertise or scientific expertise, they don't really rely on experts because they want to go with the person that they have an identity with versus they're taking their own pieces of information, which is then saying, I'm in the know. I have self-worth. I have knowledge and information. Now, I want to share something with you, Tom. Right now, I was doing an event in Utah, and I was walking through the lobby, and there was someone doing the Dunning-Kruger effect right in the lobby with as I was walking by. He was talking to these 2 other people, older gentlemen, and he was talking about how much he knew about the violence on the streets of liberal cities. I'm going like, I was listening to this guy going, I was going like, he is literally getting his need for recognition, his self-worth, his identity, going like, have you ever been to Chicago? Have you ever been to Portland? Have you ever been to the various different cities? Have you ever been there? And that's what one of the problems with the Dunning-Kruger effect is. A person's self-worth will tend to go up, and regrettably, the internet has amplified this experience by all you got to do is read an article and then you have an expertise of it. You and I do a little bit of it, but we tend to vet it in 2 or 3 different ways before we bring it forward. And it doesn't mean that we're going to be fully true on the thing that we're standing on, but because we can admit to that we're bringing in a point of view with a little bit of vulnerability and go like, okay, well, I'm interested in argue the other side of this. Go ahead and try it, and
so
we'll be happy.
were you tempted to walk up and say, oh, so you know a lot about the violence in these cities, so you've been to these cities and seen the violence yourself? I can imagine you wanting to do something like that, but did you stay away from the light and not do that?
Well,
not that you were a part of the conversation.
No. This is a very important conversation. This is like the best question you could have ever asked, by the way, just to let you know. I could literally spend my entire life going and interrupting people about the things they're saying or doing. So that's the first viewpoint, okay, to get a hold of. I can say, wait a minute, I'm not sure if that's exactly right. I'm not sure if that belief structure you're running, where'd you get that from? And I can do that. Okay, but here's the takeaway with that. There's times when I would say I lean more towards the 51% engagement versus the 49% non-engagement. This was one of those 49% non-engagement because I had to get somewhere, and I was going like, wow, that's good. I'll talk about that on my podcast, but I'm not going over there and doing 15 minutes right now because I got to get to my event and I can't do this thing right now. It's like, a human being's got to pick their battles, right? You got to pick the ones you can do. But if I did go up there, here's the first question I would have asked. Oh, so I'm guessing you're really feeling confident and scared about the safety of people in those cities. I would have led with empathy, not led with what my judgmental mind would have wanted to say, which is the one that I said and you repeated back. It's like, hey, have you ever been to those cities? Because that would have been vetting truth. But see, that hangs the person's self-worth and their belief structure and their identity and their connection with the other people they're talking about out on the fringe
or on the plank a bit. Yeah,
out on the plank too early, instead of going like, well, I'm guessing that you really feel scared and you really feel confident about the violence that's taking place. Yeah. And you really don't want violence to take place. Yeah. You have a need for order, and you would like things to be done in an orderly, legal way. Am I hearing that correct? Yes. So you would like people to follow the laws the way they're written. Yes. So when people are marching the way they're marching and speaking up when a law is not being followed, now, you don't like that as much because you would rather have peace and harmony and people just to not speak up when something they feel is wrong. You don't want them to speak up. Is that right? Yes. Because now all of a sudden his value of speaking up, his need for being heard is now in question. So if I didn't like something you said, does my voice get to count more than yours? He would have to say, well, no, my voice counts the same as yours. Or he would say, my voice counts more than yours. And then I have a wonderful discussion about, I think we both have balanced voices in this. I think that the idea is for us to have a civil discussion, don't you? Yeah, well, if there's, you see.
I see where that goes. What I see happening with a lot of people talking about these things is that when they talk about the protests, and they so quickly have put the protests at the same level as the violence, that all protests equal violence, when they don't. So you'll end up having that discussion really quickly, right?
Yeah. So notice it clicks back to the fear factor that it's not safe. It's traumatic. See, a lot of people have been traumatized by parenting and various different points of society, have been traumatized about speaking up. You try talking back to your dad or your mom. If you have a kind of an authoritarian dad or mom, you're going to get hammered as a kid.
Yeah, that never works. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. Unless the parent is providing space to realize that's their job, is to let you practice arguing with you in a healthy way, which parents aren't taught that that's a part of the playbook.
Right.
You want your kids to argue with you in a healthy way. You don't want them to shut down too early, because then as soon as they turn to a boss, they're going to start submitting to them. And that'll cost them 10 years of their career and advancement. Just say it. As if that hasn't happened to both of us, so at least partly. We shut up just to make the money instead of going like, wait a minute, this doesn't meet my need for integrity. I can do much better things in my life than to listen to this boss, giving me authoritarian issues. I can take my talent out and shop it elsewhere. It's called resigning.
Right.
It's like, wait a minute, I don't have to tolerate this stuff.
So true. So true.
So true. So true. So there's no one skilled to de-escalate the president. There's no one skilled in the media to de-escalate his messages. The American voter is really struggling with that next level of awareness about how to manage their own emotions when something's being said in the media, when something is, and how to hold people accountable for what they say. We're really struggling with that as a nation, and these different ways to be empathetic to the Trump voter. We really need to move them up to the list and go like, wait a minute, if I were them and I was looking at these things, and my button was for safety was getting pushed because I had a traumatic experience or I had a belief structure that my parents gave me, yeah, I would vote right there with them. I would.
Right. Yeah.
I would clearly vote with them right now. And so I think that's the thing that's really extraordinary that's taking place, is that the repetitive hijacking of person to keep kind of like the sheep in different stables using these different trigger points, because he's using all of these different trigger points with each speech, and still all of a sudden the engagement is like, oh my gosh, this is what the engagement is.
Well,
it is.
And he's even using more of these. And I just want to make sure our listeners know to definitely go to the blog post at purchasingtruth.com, because we're going to have the full list of, there's 14 actual traits. We're not going to cover them all here. And there's the article that really that you mentioned earlier from the Raw Story. We have a link to that and the blog post as well, so you can see how this was written about by a journalist, and it's a psychological it's really a psychological perspective analysis, if you will, of the 14 key traits that try to explain Trump supporters.
Yeah, Tom, I really appreciate that. That'll help people to get clarity, because if there's anything that you and I talk about on this thing, is to maintain your curiosity and your openness to go like, hey, wait a minute, which one of these things is hooked to me? And I can go through this entire list and think about, okay, if I am not a right-leaning person, if I'm a left-leaning person, what variation of this do I believe? You can look at these 14 things and and just flip it to the other side and go like, oh, this is what is actually happening here. This is what one of the biggest challenges are to really talk about and to have some value about. And I do, and for those of you who are listening also, is that I do webinars on communication, and I actually have one coming up that'll also be available in replay, of how to talk to voters or prospective voters, because we're always going to be in some kind of cycle of voting that's going to take place, whether it's the midterm elections in 2 years. And I'm just shaking my head right now, is like, what's that going to look like, in reference to, and it doesn't matter who wins from the perspective of how do you return to our primary value of one nation, under God, indivisible. How do you get those things? One nation, under God, indivisible. How do you get those three things to line up next to each other, and then see if you can get your consciousness aligned to the curiosity about what are the things that you're advocating for, and then having compassion for what the other person is advocating for. I can believe certain things are wrong, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to choose the thing that's I believe is wrong at the expense of somebody else's choice, which is really a big part of this. The American experience is to allow people to have more choices than others. So, well, more to come on all this, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Bill. Thanks so much. That was great. I really enjoyed that. And I look forward to next time, maybe trying to define some political terms and what words that, people are using actually mean. I think that's a great place to land next time.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tom. More to come. Thanks. All right, bye.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.